Hey folks, David Stewart here. I am here with Vaughn Fry of Vaughn Jog Vlog, which is his current channel. He's a movie critic and comedian. And we're going to talk a little bit today about YouTube, how it's changed over the last 10 years. I've only really been doing it for about 5 years now. So I have a little bit less experience, I think, than Vaughn, but a lot of things have changed. And as things change, there's going to be certain complaints, both from the viewership and from a content maker's perspective. So we'd like to take a few minutes and talk about some of the issues that are going on in YouTube and are likely to persist in YouTube.
Hey, thanks for having me,
It's good to,
David. I haven't done this on Skype quite in this fashion, so I'm hoping this works out and I don't cut you off when you talk too much because usually I can't see the person I'm cutting off when they start talking. So,
okay.
yeah, I started on YouTube about 10 years ago. I think end of December 2017, and then really got in the swing of things as I was rounding out my senior year in college. And YouTube was a very different place. There were so few people actually making content. I was number one on the leaderboard of the very first Facebook game, like before Farmville, before whatever anybody's doing on Facebook. There was a game called Fight Club. And on Fight Club, you just had to come in and you fought twice a day. You just had to get there and click, like, fight this guy. And you'd always beat the guy below you. And I found some way to cheat my way up to the top by clicking the button too many times and it registered as multiple fights or something. So I was putting together, like, way better fights than anybody else. And off to the side on the leaderboard, you could put a phrase. And I would just put a link to YouTube. And people would actually come in each day to see my latest YouTube video as posted on that leaderboard. So when I was starting, like 1,000 views in a couple hours was nothing. That was like pretty easy to pull off. And there were so many people who made like sketches. Sketches used to be popular on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like before vlogs, people were really putting together, okay, let's try to make this look like the movie 300. And that was the type of thing people watched. People watched Michael Jackson music videos, video game trailers, and sketches. And so everybody was doing sketches. When I do a sketch, tons of views, 20,000 views in no time whatsoever. But then things really started to change at YouTube. I think people lost their aspirations. They got to where they just vlog. They just talk about the latest Marvel movie. They're talking about the latest Star Wars movie now. People are phoning it in far more than they used to.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm phoning it in when I talk about Star Wars personally, but I think that's what kind of attracts whoever likes my channel to me, is I try to go a little bit deeper than just, whoa, it was cool, and it was so cool when Iron Man like did that thing and his suit like did this, versus looking at the actual story stuff. Now, when I got into YouTube, I've been watching YouTube for like 10 years or whenever it came out, and that was pretty much how you described. There was a lot of different wacky stuff, and I got into YouTube in 2013 making guitar content, and the only reason I did that is that my old phone finally got bricked by an Apple update, and so my mom bought me a new phone, and it was an iPhone 5, like had just come out, and I could record video. So I'm like, I recorded some videos, and I'm like, I'll put these on YouTube. Why not? I had already kind of decided I was going to give up performing on the guitar because I was sick of it, and I made a very long video describing why I decided to walk away from performing and try different things. But I'm like, well, I'd like to record my knowledge. So I'd put the camera up when I had a 30 or 40 minutes of downtime in between teaching guitar lessons, and I would just start creating some lesson content. And people eventually started watching it. And my original idea was like, it'll just be out there and nobody will watch it. But it got to be a thing where, I gained some subscribers. And then over time, I kind of realized that most of that content just wasn't very popular. People would come by and ask, hey, when are you going to do another video on this musical topic? I'd do a video on it. It'd get 200 views. The next day I'd come on and I'd turn on the camera and talk about, I don't know, some random political thing, and it'd get 50,000 views. So the incentive for me was to talk about stuff that wasn't music, but I think that's also the nature of how YouTube changed from about 2012, 2013 to the next few years, which is you went from what I call long tail content, which is content people are specifically searching for and are specifically interested in, to content that's like topical. You know what I mean? That's like whatever, there's a trend to the topic instead of being what I call long tail. Like somebody wants to look up Raschiato technique, which is a guitar technique. You type in how to play Raschiato, like my video is the first one. It's like a long tail keyword. But that's not most YouTube users and hasn't been most YouTube users for a while. They're more interested in like daily content, different kinds of things that entertain them on a daily basis the way TV would. And so the game's changed quite a bit since I started. And I find that I can't get a lot of viewership talking about educational topics. I still talk about them because I want the information out there, but it's more just because I want to do it and I want to give content to people who want it, not so much that I think it's going to give me any kind of success on YouTube.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a lot of growth in being a resource.
Yeah.
Like if people look up a how-to, okay, you taught them once, but maybe they don't need to know more about it. They were looking for something specific once.
Yeah.
Instead, now you want to become the personality. So your weight on a subject matters because people value your specific opinion. When I started out doing movie reviews, that's what a movie channel was, or a gaming channel was reviews of video games. We were speaking earlier about the Angry Video Game Nerd and how he became like the template for the game review. But now, if you look at where he is today compared to people who just live stream and screen into the microphone and entertain the kids that way, he's way down the list. Like they may not even know of Cinemassacre and James Rolfe, and they just want to watch the kid who screams while playing Grand Theft Auto or Fortnite or whatever. And I can't think of anything more boring than watching other people play video games. If anything, it's just a reminder of me that I could be playing the game instead.
Yeah.
But
well,
that's what works.
Oddly enough, I kind of feel that same way about sports. When I'm watching football
with
or
sports,
baseball, I'm like, I
not
think
the
I'd like to
size
go
of
outside
these
and play.
guys.
Yeah.
Right, well, I'm not the size of Gronk, and I'd rather not get hit the way he does. So, like, I can kind of see some reason to watch that, but it's in a video game. It's like we all have the hands. We're just as good at this as the guy screaming.
Yeah.
Why not just do it ourselves?
Yeah, the screaming videos. Sometimes I appreciate watching somebody who's playing video games and is really, 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 really good. Like it's cool to watch somebody be exceptionally good at something. Somebody picks up, watching Yngwie Malmsteen play guitar. There's guys out there who are really, really good at games, but I don't think that those are the most popular content creators. I think the most popular ones are like these screamers, the people who are entertaining people while they play the game. Like the PewDiePie is not an expert gamer. Comparing him to like, I don't know, Trump who plays Hearthstone, who I haven't watched in forever because I don't play Hearthstone anymore, but he's a really good Hearthstone player and he instructs you for how to play the game, but he's not a very unique or interesting personality in himself. He's a very kind of calm, subdued sort of guy.
If you're going to get into this, you have to pick the game that's going to be the game for years to come, and you need to do it early. So that takes a little bit of magic too, to be like, well, I guess I'm dedicating my life to Fortnite. I sure hope Fortnite picks up, you know?
And then if it doesn't, how do you pick up the pieces? A lot of World of Warcraft content creators have gone through this cycle where they start making a bunch of content about World of Warcraft. And it's a very complex game, or it has been in the past. It remains still pretty complex. So there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to make content on. There's always changes to the game that you can make news content on. And at some point, you're done playing World of Warcraft. You want to play a different freaking game. So people get pissed when, Heels versus Babyface says, I'm not going to do World of Warcraft content anymore. I look at all these games I didn't play because I was playing WoW and making content for you guys. I don't enjoy the game anymore. And I'd rather work a day job and play stuff I enjoy than sit around making content for a game I don't care about anymore. And it's like, oh, it's another World of Warcraft content maker who rose to fame making WoW content and now wants to talk about other games. It's like, isn't that a little bit natural? Have you ever wanted to just play a different game once in your life? I think there's people who only play World of Warcraft and literally play no other game besides World of Warcraft.
That's where the money is in the gaming right now, is to just play one game. Or what you could do is not play any games at all and just talk about the gaming news. So you just regurgitate a Kotaku or a Polygon article to your installed base, and it gets to be a hot news item. And for me, I actually am an expert gamer. I've gotten records in many different games. I have a world record in Mario Kart 7. I can beat just about any game I play. To to the point that it's like, well, I'm not going to bother playing that because I would just end up beating it anyways. Is kind of my thinking. And I'm thinking, well, would anybody watch me give tips on that? Probably not. But if somebody wants my thoughts on Overwatch, that's where a lot of my views come in, because I have like, I'm one of very few people who have all the achievements in Overwatch. And one of the tough things about getting the achievements there is you only have a limited window to get some of them. So they'll have an update for an event, like a PvE event, and it'll only go for a few weeks. So if you didn't get it at that time, you have to wait a year until that event comes up again.
They do the same. They did the same thing in World of Warcraft. I think that's where they pulled that from. So they'd have these seasonal events. I remember my
Both
friend
Blizzard
Matt
properties
got this super rad mount in World of Warcraft, this Violet Protodrake, because he did all the seasonal stuff. I'm like, oh man, I can't believe you did all those achievements, and I can't believe you did all that. And he's like, well, now I have a faster mount than anyone else. I'm like, okay, yeah, good point. But
well, in Overwatch they have a new character, and the first thing I will do is try to get their achievements, because I know a video on getting the achievements for that character will be a hot item. And when you have a channel where some people have signed up for specific stuff, you're kind of obliged to continue with it. Yeah. So for the past 2 years, it's been with me. I have to play Overwatch, or I'm not going to have viewers. Yeah. I have to either play Overwatch or talk about Star Wars endlessly. Yeah. Like, a lot of people have become Star Wars channels. I think that you've become a Star Wars channel. Like, a lot of people have found you through Star Wars. A lot of people found me through Star Wars because I put out a review of The Force Awakens before there were bad reviews on it. Like, it was like 98% Rotten Tomatoes.
I think my review came out like 2 days after yours or something. And then then yours started being suggested because I made a video on it.
I went to a 10 a.m. screening, and there was only adults there. And this was after the dust settled. The people who were going to give a positive review went to those midnight screenings. So I went to the next one, and there was just adults in the crowd, and just the anguish, the disgust. There was no joy. There was more laughs. Like, it was a funnier Star Wars movie than Star Wars ever needed to be. Say Kylo Ren's having the hissy fit, and then the stormtroopers turn around and go, well, we're not going to walk over there, Yeah. That got a big laugh. Harrison Ford had a lot of one-liners and stuff. But, just my takeaway was that now this made George Lucas look good. Yeah. If anything else.
And then they outdid themselves with Last Jedi, where the movie opens up with a crank call to General Hux on the bridge of a giant starship. And it's like, who thought that this would be appropriate for Star Wars? Like, Star Wars has always had some little quips, some comic relief. That's why you have C-3PO as the neurotic, anxious droid, like, worried about everything.
He's been sidelined, right? Yeah, I'm sure he didn't make much time. I haven't seen the latest one, and I made a video that would have been like a review. But I said, look, I'm not watching it, but I got just as many views as if I did watch the movie, even though I told people I'm not watching it. Yeah. But that's the kind of, you make one video about Star Wars, and if it's hot, then people keep wanting to hear Star Wars. It's like there's other things to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I kind of look at it as a long tail. So for anyone that's watching this and wants some business ideas that I think about a lot. So the long tail is this old marketing idea where you have a big funnel, you catch a lot of people with something that's accessible to and is going to catch a lot of people, and then you move them further down the line to find the really specific thing that they're super interested in, and you just give them a lot of that. So on Amazon, people might get into reading Twilight, let's say, right? Twilight has vampires, and so you suggest them some other vampire stuff, and depending on which book they end up reading next, it puts you in a different tale and eventually gets you to this point where you're only reading like gay vampire erotica written in an 18th century style. And that's like your genre, but that's the books that you're reading. So that's the idea of a long tail. So it kind of starts with Star Wars, and then anyone that kind of stays on, I deliver content that they want, and then they become an actual fan or an actual subscriber, and I'm actually delivering value. But yeah, I've seen other channels that literally all they talk about is Star Wars. I talk about Star Wars.
Have you seen Ethan Van Sciver? I think his channel, it's Comic Book Artist Pro.
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
Very talented comic book artist. Yeah. And now he has to put out like 3 videos a day about Star Wars.
Yeah, and he was really late to the party. People were like, Ethan, you got to look at Stu's review of Last Jedi. And he finally watched it on video, and he's like, this is terrible. Let me make a bunch of videos on it. And I made a couple videos on Last Jedi. And that's because I had different things to talk about with it. Like, there was a basic review where I'm like, hey, if you want explosions, it's totally going to do that for you. But if you want a story, it's not. And then the next one was, why Star Wars sucks now, and then the next one was finally a full, so I did like 4 or 5 pieces of content on that one movie. And that caught a lot of people. But then at the same time, there's people who stick around and they end up not liking me because they didn't like Last Jedi, and I articulated something they thought about it. But then as they go down the long tail, they realize that I'm telling them truths that they don't want to hear, and so they leave. And that's okay. You want to keep around the people that are actually interested in what you have to say. Star Wars.
Well, years and years back, had hard to believe, I had one of the most watched movie review channels. Like, I was there neck and neck with like Beyond the Trailer, and I made a video calling out Beyond the Trailer and how they were basically cheating the idea of a review on YouTube, and then that made me the bad guy, and then I have to go and run and get other channels and do other things, basically, because I just had like all of these indie mogul fanboys coming and attacking me, white knighting, all this stuff. But it got to this way where, okay, you could do a movie review, people agree with you, they subscribe. And it didn't matter if the review was well put together, or if there was a good aesthetic to it, a good production value, or what you were said had any value. It was, I agree with you, I subscribe on that. And then they will only be with you until they disagree. So the more movie reviews I put out, the more chances I had to get people to disagree and then hate me for that.
Yeah.
Now, if you only talk about the big tentpole and just Star Wars, and you only have people agreeing with you, you can keep those fans infinitely. But to actually do the new content and then, well, I didn't agree with that, I'm going to unsubscribe now.
Yeah, but people
so there's
are
really no growth there.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you keep making Star Wars content over and over again, and I don't make Star Wars, I make Star Wars content because people ask me to review all the old movies, and I'm like, I'm happy to do that because there's a lot to talk about.
But does the internet need any more reviews of A New Hope?
Yeah, I've done one, but I don't know. People want my reviews, and if people want it, I'm gonna deliver it. But it's one of these things that, like, let's say, you make a point. So people came and didn't like Last Jedi and went on YouTube to figure out other people who didn't like Last Jedi, let's say. And so if you just continue to make the same content that Last Jedi sucks, and then those people eventually get bored. Like, they'll stop caring about it. So it's not really a sustainable strategy to just say, make the same thing over and over again. You have to provide some variety, or you're not going to maintain any subs. So I look at it like, what do people want? Hopefully people want my honest opinion, because that's all I'm willing to give. And so if I think somebody came and like spurged out when I said Attack of the Clones was the most underrated Star Wars movie, which I think it is. I think it's hated far beyond what's actually deserving for it to be hated. And it's like, screw you, I'm unsubscribing. I'm like, okay, like, did you want my opinion or did you not want it? Like, that's the idea of the channel. Same thing when I reviewed Black Panther. I gave it a positive score. I talked about a lot of the things in it that were good. And it's really hard to look at a $200 million movie and say, like, oh, it's a 1 out of 10. It's like, not if you're being honest, right? If you're being honest, production value matters, even if the story's bad. Production does have an effect, and that's why people watch a lot of movies like Marvel and Star Wars. And someone comes on and says, what Jew paid you to give this a positive review? And I'm like, I'm paid based on the number of people who want to click and watch this review. That's it. If you want to unsubscribe, that's fine. But I'm the only person if you want to hear your own voice spoken back to you, record your own review and then watch it. Right. Hopefully you want somebody else's take on it, somebody else that had a different perspective than you. That's what I like. And I think that's what a lot of my persistent viewers actually enjoy is things that are a little bit different, things that are a little bit not what is normal to say and not what is necessarily exactly what they think.
Yeah, I would hope that people are subscribed to a channel because they value the opinion, but in many of these cases, the people who have gotten to the top are those who are least deserving of that valued opinion. They're the shills.
Yeah.
The people who go to the premiere, oh, I wonder if they're going to say anything bad about Black Panther, right? If you want to keep coming to these premieres, if you want to get into Avengers
Yeah.
Infinity War premiere, you better have a good review for us, right? Get a good blurb to put out there.
Yeah, I've talked about this
So
in
you
my
can't trust any of those people.
Yeah, I've talked about this with why you can't trust critics. Why can't you trust critics? Well, if they are getting any kind of advantage from being a critic, like they get advanced screenings, and this wasn't the case like 30 years ago. You know, nobody ever, I shouldn't say nobody. It
30
was
years ago, when the newspapers had some power,
yeah.
they had critics who could put out their piece, and now the shills that they have remaining are just those who don't want to be unemployed.
Yeah, and it's you have to have a little bit of a cozy relationship with the industry at large. People want to hear that the movies that they enjoy are should be enjoyed. People want to hear that if they go see a movie, they're going to see something good. It kind of primes expectations, and I think the studios know this. If you see a review beforehand and the person's like, "It's great, it's explosive, it blew me away," someone goes in with a positive expectation, and that alters your mindset. It creates a bias, an expectations bias, and I've talked about this lots of times. And I think reviews cue into this. So you have an expectations bias going into it. You expect it to be really good, and that will kind of help you forgive the parts that you don't like and kind of hype up the parts you do like and maybe come away with a more positive experience. Or rarely it becomes the opposite. And that was my experience with Force Awakens. I went in with like really high expectations because people were like, "This is the best Star Wars movie ever." And I went in and watched it. I'm like, "This is the worst Star Wars movie I've ever seen." You know, my disappointment was so great after seeing that movie because of that expectations bias. And the studios know it, and of course reviewers know it. And if you want to continue having that review out early when it's relevant, like reviews only relevant when people are wanting to go see that movie. You know, I do reviews of stuff on video. It
Well,
never
I've been
gets
doing
the
Netflix
views of the new
reviews.
stuff.
Yeah, I might get 10 or 20 viewers. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it could be a studio film, but if it was 10, 20 years ago, 80s film, whatever, I like the idea of reviewing something on Netflix that's available to more people for
Yeah.
free if they wanted to check it out. Here's my thoughts on it. No one cares. The reviews are only relevant when they're week one, and it
Yeah.
goes that way with video games too. I was doing pretty good work with video games on new release game reviews, but I'm just one guy. I try to beat the game before I review it, and you can't do that against IGN or GameSpot,
And
where
they
they
get it
have a
early.
fleet of people who get it early. I had one game I ever got early, and there was an embargo date on it. So I was able to, at 9 a.m. that morning, when the embargo's lifted, have my review out there the same time as IGN and GameSpot over on YouTube, and I had just as many views as they did. But I don't get that opportunity often, and why would anybody want to give that power to me, just some lowly guy in Kansas?
Yeah, unless they
you
feel
know,
like you're going to give it back, positive
And I
review.
gave it a positive review. It was a good game. What if it was awful? I mean, it's not like I had any more chances, but I sure wouldn't after that.
Yeah, and you see a lot of video game reviewers saying you need to stop pre-ordering games, people. Dude, there's no point to doing that, and you're just kind of you're giving the studio money for no reason, because when the game sucks, if the game sucks, they still have your money. Like, you need to wait for people to play it and review it to make a good consumer decision. Just stop pre-ordering stuff. And for some reason people won't do it. It's like, well, if you pre-order it, you get this cool gun. It's like, it's a solo PvE game.
Well,
Who
now
cares
they're
about
doing
a better gun?
you
I'll turn the
pre-order so
difficulty
that you
down.
get the early date so you can play it early and get your YouTube video out sooner.
Oh,
So
yeah, I
that
didn't
now
think
they're
of that.
pre-ordering for that reason. They've realized that people, rather than have some exclusive in-game item or a special cape to wear or a sword or whatever, they'd just rather play it a week early or 3 days early or whatever, so they can have that YouTube video.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, which I hadn't really considered. But yeah, consumer habits are really hard to change. And I would love to do game reviews. I'd love to talk more about games, because game design is something I'm really interested in and something I really enjoy thinking about and talking about, and I love playing video games. I have very little time, though, to sit around and play a game. So for me to be able to give a thorough review, like you beat the game before you review it, which to me is a pretty honest thing to shoot for. I like RPGs. I don't have an extra 50 hours to beat a game the week it comes out and deliver a review. It's going to take me several weeks of playing just that one game, because I'm a father, because I have other businesses that I do. I just don't have the time to compete with guys who have nothing else on their plate and can play a game for 50 hours straight because they're 21 and don't have anything else to do, I guess.
Well, I can't keep up with the games, so I've specialized in Overwatch. I'm playing a little Fortnite. I may have a video tutorial on how to do something. I don't do a stream unless there's a specific end goal to it. Streaming the PvE run on the hardest setting.
Yeah.
To me, that's a stream. To just be like, I'm playing Fortnite again. Okay, well, what's the end goal? We're just playing for an hour. It's like, well, what what does that really entail? I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. There's nothing structured here. It doesn't work out. And there's actually fewer video games now, I'm finding. It's like there's only a few titles coming out. They may have their release this month, and then everybody waits the next month. And a few things might get dropped around Black Friday or a few weeks earlier. But the video game market seems to be shrinking, like the movies, to where it's just the tent poles.
Yeah, now what's interesting about that to me is that Steam, there were more games released on Steam in 2017 than all prior years combined. There were thousands of games released on Steam. They're mostly indie titles. So the barrier to entry is really low now. But AAA games, they're making fewer of them. I feel like there's fewer of them, and I also feel that the quality of gameplay has declined as they focus on parts of gameplay that they can more easily monetize versus gameplay that's just good and fun for itself. So it's really hard to find a game that just you buy the game and you get the whole game. Like, it was really refreshing when I bought Final Fantasy 13 and I sat down to play it and there was no DLC, and I'm like, this is just the whole game. I can just play this game. Like, what? I can't believe they came out with this.
Yeah, I had a video on that too, and I beat that as quick as I could, and I put a video in and all that. But games are coming out broken now, where you can't even play them for a few months until they eventually fix the bugs, and then you're supposed to review it. Or now there's some DLC. In the case of Overwatch, it's constantly being updated. So how are you supposed to review it? And so my review of Overwatch came out way before a lot of the current game was available. So it's this murky area of when is the game actually the game, especially if it's shipped broken.
Yeah, they ship it. They set a release date. Publishers will set a release date, and the game is coming out on that date, come hell or high water. It comes out. There's a day one patch. So even when it comes out at midnight, people have to wait for an hour to download a huge patch. There's going to be a bunch of bugs the first couple days. The idea of a game shipping the way it did in 1995, where you put the game into your Nintendo and you play it, and that's the game.
Well, of course, Pandora's box has been opened, and we can't go back to an update-free world. And now with microtransactions, free-to-play, pay-to-win scenarios, if you want to have an advantage in multiplayer, and to just think every time I'm getting beat by some doctor's kid who wants to load out with a rocket launcher and a tank while I'm walking around with boots and an assault rifle, I'm not going to keep playing this.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I stopped playing Hearthstone. I played it in beta for a long time, and I didn't really pay any money. I gave them some money for the first little adventure they had, and I might have bought a couple packs because I felt like, this game has given me lots of value. I'll happily give the value that I feel like I'm getting in terms of entertainment. But they kept coming out with so many expansions and changing so many cards and changing the meta in such significant ways that you had to constantly be spending. If you weren't spending $200 every 6 months on the game, you weren't going to have the cards you needed to compete and get past, say, like rank 10 on the ladder. Their ladder system is really hard to climb up. And I was able to climb up pretty high in beta. I never got legend. But after beta, it's like I never cracked 13. It just wasn't possible. You'd have to play for 6 hours a day and have spent hundreds of dollars on cards to have everything you needed in order to actually compete in the game. It's really kind of disheartening. And about the 20th time you see a certain legendary card pop out and kill you, whichever one, like Dr. Boom, whichever card was like the card everyone put in all their decks, you just kind of want to turn it off and do something else. You get a little tired of losing because you're not being milked enough. You know what I mean?
Well, in Overwatch, it's one of the few games going where there isn't some kind of scheme to make money that affects the gameplay. They do have loot boxes, which and I have a video coming out on this. There's recent news how the loot boxes, which give you these different skins for characters or a voice line or whatever, they're a random chance, but you earn them or you can buy them. So they want you to buy them so that the devs make money.
Mm-hmm.
But you can earn them, and that's slow. And during a timed event, you're not going to get those special boxes if you don't buy them. So people will buy them wanting to get the new skins for their favorite character, but they don't buy that skin specifically, and so they're looking at that as a form of gambling in Belgium.
Belgium, yeah, just made it illegal. I know Hawaii was trying to do something like that as a state. Now, I've actually made some content on this, and the thing is that gambling. First of all, if you look at it as just a raw transaction, you spend $20 on loot boxes, you pretty much are going to get the thing that you want. Let's say you should just sell for $20. You may not, but it would average out. I don't know, depending on how much it is. You could figure out whatever nominal value it is. So the value of the skin is however much money on average a person has to spend in order to get the skin. But the reason they don't sell it that way is that there's a psychological response to gambling. The risk produces like a little stress hormone, and then the relief produces a little bit of endorphins. So there's a little rush from gambling. That's why gambling is an addictive behavior. And so I think there are some ethical issues when you have something that maybe children are playing. I have no problems with loot boxes or gacha systems in general, but maybe children are playing and they have their parents' credit card, and you're just kind of hijacking their little psychological system to get them to buy lots of loot boxes. It becomes an addictive thing.
One of the reasons I'm playing Overwatch though is all the updates are free, so there's no DLC, but a lot of these updates may be coming as people were buying the loot boxes. That's where their extra revenue source is.
Yeah.
So if they get rid of that, are they going to be like, oh, hey, I'm the developer, Jeff Kaplan, and I'm telling you guys, there's a new update coming, but it's a DLC and you have to pay for it because now we can't do the loot boxes. Bye. I think that's the kind of thing that could end up happening if they have to do away with these revenue streams.
Yeah. Well, I think if you go far enough back in time, you see some issues with MMOs doing this. So if you go back in time 10 years, every MMO was a subscription-based MMO. You paid $10 or $15 a month. You played the game. You got whatever patches were being released. You got all the access to content. What you got or didn't get was based on what you did in the game. At a certain point, free-to-play MMOs started coming out, and they would sell loot or sell loot boxes. They would sell all these different things to give you an advantage in the game in lieu of a subscription service, which meant you could technically play for free, but you really couldn't win for free, so you had to pay a certain amount of money to win. And people started gravitating towards those because of that, essentially that exchange. Like, I can pay to win, or I can not pay to play. You feel like you're getting in for free, but you end up spending more money, and businesses are going to end up doing whatever is going to make them the most money, and they're going to do as much as they can, as much as consumers will tolerate. So if consumers tolerate pay to win, they're just going to do that. I think World of Warcraft might be one of the last MMOs to actually charge a subscription service, which kind of says something about its strength. That and Final Fantasy XIV charge subscription services, so it's really a rare thing now. But I'm okay. I like the subscription service model better than kind of selling individual items, because you're not incentivized to build the gameplay around the item that you're selling. You build the gameplay around the time spent playing in the game. You want people to play for many months. That incentivizes the company to just put a lot of content, a lot of stuff to do in the game, so that people don't turn off the subscription and stop playing.
I don't play many mobile games, but I see plenty of ads for them, especially on YouTube. You'll come across the latest whatever, and it'll always have some kind of sounds familiar title. Legends of the Saga, whatever, right? Saga of something fruit and all this stuff. But I have seen a couple where it said something like level playing field, or they're trying to stress that it's not a pay to win scenario. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that, oh, surely this is free to play, pay to win setup. Now they're trying to say, oh, but not ours. Because I guess there's an assumption now that every mobile game
is just pay to win.
Yeah, it's just pay to win. Yeah. I was way up there on the Age of Empires Castle Siege leaderboard. I got into that. This was a few years ago, and it was fun. I enjoyed the old Age of Empires where I was mostly playing against the computer and just building up my castles and then taking over the computer's land and whatever. But with the new one, it's like, okay, it takes you a week to build this castle. Or you could pay $30 and the castle's built instantly. And then you get into battles, and you may have a few battles you can do, like one every 8 hours, and you have to check in on the stats of your castle, see if it's been raided, because there's this window of opportunity people have to attack you after you freshly attack somebody. Well, if you want to just drop $1,000 into the game, you can attack 100 people whenever you want to, and you can only get attacked once. So to get to the very top of the leaderboard, it wasn't a skill thing. It wasn't, oh, this guy has a great defense or he's so good at attacking. It's who put the most money into this game. Here's a list of the people. That's what the top 10 was.
Yeah, and I think a lot of games, eventually you end up kind of following that model. If it's a gacha game, it's, how much money can you spend to summon as many little dudes as you can to get the very best collection of little dudes to go power up and do whatever you're going to do. So I definitely get that. I get that.
I've only just cracked the master's rank in Overwatch a few days ago, and proudly I have never spent any money on the loot box system. Never.
Would the loot box system have affected that, or?
No, it wouldn't have. It would have affected nothing, but there are so many kids playing the game who are like, oh, well, I'm going to put $5 towards loot boxes. It's like $5 gives you like something like 3 loot boxes. Mm-hmm. And you may get a loot box in about an hour and a half of playing the game otherwise. So there is like this window saved. But, when I was a kid, I wanted something in my hand for some money.
Yeah.
$5, that could be like, I mowed the lawn for $5. Give me something physical like a Ninja Turtle.
Yeah.
Now kids are actually spending their allowance on things that don't really exist. When the game is obsolete or pulled from the servers, you have nothing.
Yeah, and
that's where their money's going.
I've talked about this, like if I buy Magic cards, Magic is a gacha system, right? You open up the pack and you get some random cards.
Well, at least
I have
there.
cards and I can trade them for other things. I can't really trade Hearthstone
Well, people
cards.
make fun of me for buying the games on console where you actually have a disc. You open the thing up and you put the disc in your system. Novel thought there. Instead of the pre-order now through the Xbox Live for the digital version, which costs the same and you can't sell it. So like when you complete the game, you've done everything you want to do.
Yeah, what about 20 years down the line? 20 years down the line, will that functionality exist? Are those servers going to be up to verify that you own the program that's installed on your hard drive?
They are running across instances now where rights have been pulled for some older arcade games, as these systems have been in place 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. And what they do is they'll pull it from the store, but if you have previously purchased it, you are allowed to re-download it again should you have a new Xbox you're using or whatever.
Yeah.
Do they,
That's interesting.
the weird thing is there's no obligation that has to be made available to you.
Yeah.
You're just kind of fortunate that they do.
It's the same thing with Steam. If Valve were to go out of business, what would happen to all your game licenses? And people are like, oh, you're going to lose all your game licenses. I'm like, well, I'll just tell you that you're probably morally okay finding another copy for free. You're probably okay.
There was a brand new arcade opened in my city, and they had a lot of old cabinets, but they also had like a Neo Geo MVS cabinet that somehow managed to have every Neo Geo game on it. Now, back in the day, these would have 1, maybe 3 or 5 games.
Usually there were like 4 slots.
Yeah, there was like these slots on the marquee, and it would show what they had. Not every game. No, that would be an illegal cart out of like Taiwan in an arcade where it was like $10 for a day pass at the arcade. And it's a small arcade, but $10 you could look at it as a pretty good value in a couple of hours to play Mortal Kombat with your friends or whatever. But to have like a Neo Geo arcade there with the bootleg games going, probably not legal.
Yeah.
But with all this stuff available out online, I tell people, look, you're probably okay to go ahead and take these games, especially if they're not available in any capacity. If SNK doesn't want to put the game out there on Xbox, then go get it.
Yeah.
Just don't charge anybody to play it.
Yeah.
Don't hack something. Don't build a Raspberry Pi and sell it on Etsy.
Yeah. That's the thing. As long as you're not making profit, it doesn't matter to me. I've had a lot of discussions with people on my channel about intellectual property, and there's people who think, it should be disregarded. I don't know. They want to pirate everything. If somebody worked to make that software, they deserve to get paid for it. But if it's not for sale, like there's a concept out there called abandonware. Like you can go play one of Bungie's older games called Marathon. You can go play it on LF1. It's abandonware. I've
been wanting to play that actually.
It's a great shooter. It's as good as Doom. And in fact, I think the level design is really superior to Doom and Doom 2. And it actually has a story. And they did a novel way of showing the story, which is rather than, because back then you didn't have a way to tell a great story in a video game other than through like dialogue boxes. And it's a 3D shooter. How do we do dialogue boxes? So there's computer terminals that you have to access to talk to these different AIs, and you learn the story by interacting with these AIs. So it's a really interesting way that they told the stories of there's all three of them. You can get it at LF1. You can download the games and the engine. There's even high texture. Somebody redrew all the textures, so they're like crisp and high texture, and you can play them on a modern PC, and they look great. I definitely recommend it if somebody is into old shooters like Doom and hasn't played the Marathon series. And I think originally they weren't that popular because the very first one was only available on Macintosh. And Macintosh in the 90s was started off as a big platform but declined significantly in the second half of the 90s, which meant a lot of people didn't play
forget that there was a time before iTunes and an iPod where Mac was like on life support, where it was all the software was on Windows, so you're getting a Windows, and then you'd have some weird friend who had a Mac because he wanted to be weird, and that was the only reason he really had a Mac. Maybe there's some more reliability to it. It cost more, but you're kind of like, well, why would I get that when everything I want to play is going to be on something else? And now that everything works together, basically. There's no software you're missing out on if you have a Mac. It was a different world back in the 90s as computers go.
Yeah, and I'd say I had Macs, I had PCs as well. I had a Mac because a couple of the software programs that I used and my dad used were Macintosh only. Mac had kind of this weird foothold in the creative arts. So a lot of the creative software you could only get on Macintosh, like Finale and some of the recording software.
Well, I edit most of my video on Final Cut Pro, and I use an old version, like Final Cut Pro 6, I think, it was like 2006 or so. And that was what they taught it where I learned film in college. And I guess everything else now is just about the same, be it Sony Vegas, Adobe Premiere. But with that being so accessible and in many cases built in, like I'm probably going to put this video somewhere that I'm recording on my phone, edit it in iMovie that comes on my phone, and with all this stuff ubiquitous, there's like no reason to pay anybody to edit. Mm-hmm. So whereas people in my class thought they would be film editors, now everybody's like, oh, my phone can edit, so why would I pay you? You're just going to be like the intern editor of my indie movie. Is the way it goes with this, and also same thing with Photoshop. If everybody has Photoshop on their computer, nobody wants to pay you to be a graphic designer to use it. So there's such maybe if you were at the very top of the food chain, you could actually make some money doing it. It is weird to think that for decades everybody's had a word processor on their computer, but the top authors can make money still. Yeah. Instead of people going, oh, why would I read your book when I can write my own?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I definitely have seen this in the audio world with audio production software, DAWs, digital audio workstations. You can get Audacity, which is free. There's even some free versions of Cakewalk. If you buy a piece of recording hardware, it usually comes with some free version of the software anyway, that has all the functionality of Pro Tools. Like Pro Tools 5 was what we used when I was an undergraduate, and that was like 15 years ago. And so it has all the same functionality. You can edit audio without any problems in Audacity and fairly quickly, quicker than you used to be able to edit it back in the early 2000s. So now most musicians, I tell them, like, you need to have basic production skills because it's easy to do now. The software is cheap, and you're not going to want to be paying an engineer to sit around and just click through fades. The software is so powerful now, anyone can do it. So I know a lot of people that are like, I'm going to go and I'm going to learn production and I'm going to be an engineer. I'm like, if you're doing it to support your own recording, that's great, but you're not going to find very many people willing to pay you to do it. Not anymore. Like, I used to get paid to do it 15 years ago. That was when the hardware was rare, the software was expensive, the skills were really rare. No one knew anything about this stuff. It's like today, if you buy a $100 interface from Guitar Center, it's going to come with an audio editing software that is good enough to record an album with. That's crazy to think
I mean,
about.
like, when I graduated, it looked like you could make money editing video, editing music video, commercials, whatever. Now, if you go on like Indeed or Monster and they're looking for people to edit videos, it's like, well, I could edit videos or I could get paid more money to work at McDonald's. Tough choice. Let's see. I only went to school for how many years to edit the videos, and now everybody thinks that's nothing. So, yeah, it's to the point where it's like you have to be working on your own thing. If I'm going to edit videos for free, at least it's going to be my videos.
Yeah, you're a movie. And this brings me into bringing it back around to YouTube. Once upon a time, YouTube really emphasized content that was like people's movies, their skits, things that they actually edited and put together and took some time to create. And somewhere along the way, the model, the algorithm, and the user base transformed into one that wasn't interested in you spending all that time editing and was more interested just in things that were put out on a regular basis, put out really quickly and were very topical to what they were interested in at that particular moment. They'd rather hear the Kotaku news read to them than read it, So it's an interesting shift that happened.
Well, I think that this came along in some way around the time Jimmy Fallon became the host of The Tonight Show. Because if you look at the content that he made compared to what Jay Leno made, or Conan O'Brien during the week that he hosted, he made content that was designed to become viral videos. So it'd be like, I think the first instance he did this, it was like Carly Rae Jepsen comes in, sings her song, and they look like they're recording it on a webcam. He walks up and pushes some button, and then they sit down and they play it on kid instruments in a classroom or something. And that is a shake and bake viral video right there. It's a canned viral video. You put this up on YouTube. Oh, hey, everybody's got to see this. Wait till you see what Jimmy Fallon did. And now James Corden's taken it to another level with, let's bring in celebrity to sing carpool karaoke, and it's going to be a thing every time. There is no way it's not going to be a thing. Everybody has to share this. We got Christina Aguilera singing a song at carpool karaoke. Click away. They're not making content that they thought was going to be good TV. They're making content they think people is going to click on the next day and share on Twitter and Facebook and whatever. And now people like you and I, we can't do a vlog about, hey, we thought this would be a funny sketch. No one's going to watch. We have to talk about some topic that is relevant right now. And in many cases, it's like you have to, if you were a vlogger just putting out stuff on what was popular that day, you'd have to talk about the carpool karaoke every week that they did it. So that you get your views siphoned off of the people who were looking that up. You got to get in their associated videos and all this. And they're doing nobody these favors with this thumbs up, thumbs down rating system. Remember stars? Used to have 5 stars.
Yeah.
Now they're not disliking the content of my video. They're disliking my opinion on the topic. And so that's an easy thumbs down. Any kind of infringement, thumbs down right there. So it's save the thumbs down for the things that were not what you wanted when you clicked on it. Maybe that would be a better use of it.
Yeah, if it was deceptive on, if somebody put up a thumbnail with a butt on it and it was something completely random, somebody eating porridge and staring at a camera, That actually sounds pretty funny to me. Like that sounds like a gag.
Well,
in and
sometimes
of
you look
itself,
for
but-
these viral videos and you just have the kid talking about the viral video.
Oh yeah.
But because he has the big base, it makes it, with the view count there, he gets to be at the top of the list, and he gets his money.
There's another problem with YouTube too, which is, and this is now old news, and so people don't tend to remember it. But DMCA claims and strikes were a very big deal, and they remain a big deal. But the behavior of vloggers has changed. So it used to be you'd get a lot of channels where they would edit together a bunch of stuff to talk about and to make a presentation on. Like maybe you want to make a video on this political
You're saying
persona.
like Red Letter Media's blanket reviews of Star Wars?
I've actually never watched those.
Oh, okay.
I've actually never watched them, and I don't really care to watch them.
Imagine just 2 hours of a movie with somehow not showing all of the movie, but maintaining a lot of clips to the point that you could argue copyright infringement.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I wouldn't say it's fair use if it's giving away the meat of the scenes and all, as they do, especially as they run down the film. I was putting trailers in my movie reviews 10 years back, and that should be entirely legal, as it's a review, it's fair use, it's promotional material.
All the TV guys did it.
Well, I kept getting all these takedown strikes from like every single movie I did. And some of them come in years later, and it's always some kind of big media corporation that did a review that used the trailer is now claiming I basically stole their review because the system Google puts in place says little guy always does the wrong thing. So if it's the big channel, if it's, let's see, who would say something? It could be like USA Today. It could be Associated Press. If their system says that they used a clip and I used a clip, then obviously I stole my review from them. It can't be the other way around. It can't be we just used the same clip. I obviously have stolen their review, so I need to be punished for it.
Yeah, and I've run into this with, so I did a presentation talking about CGI versus stop motion, which one's more convincing. And so I had a couple of clips from the two different versions of Clash of the Titans. The old one that everyone, with Laurence Olivier, that everyone remembers so fondly. And then the new one that is very flashy production that people are not so fond of. But we looked at the scorpion scenes, right? Well, I before the video could even go live, the video was unwatchable because it contained 6 seconds of a CG scorpion from this newer Clash of the Titans movie. They're like, oh, well, that's copyright infringement. I'm like, that's 6 seconds out of like a 15-minute lecture on CGI, right? Like to me, it was a very academic approach, but I had to redo the video because I had to redo the video and say, like, click this link to this video of the clip that I wasn't allowed to show, but it's already on YouTube. Some guy put it on YouTube. It's okay, I guess, for him to have it on YouTube, but I can't have a small portion of it in my
I guess I don't understand why there's such a double standard. When have you seen a channel called like Movie Clips, where all they do is show clips from movies, which I'm pretty sure they don't have the rights for, but somehow because they're a big channel, they're allowed to get away with this stuff.
Yeah,
and then if somebody big does step out of line, it's all the little guys get punished. Like what was it, Jake Paul or Logan Paul finds the dead body in Tokyo. One of these Pauls is always stepping out of line. So now it falls on everybody else to have these censorship rules, because they seem to think I'm going to find all these dead bodies in Kansas now because that got him so much exposure. Why hand out the punishments to the people who didn't do anything? And when what they should be doing is running these Paul kids off and let somebody else fill the void.
Yeah, I really don't know what. Well, I know what the justification behind it is that YouTube really wants to avoid any lawsuits from these big, giant media corporations that have the ear of Congress. People wonder why copyright law is so long in the United States. It keeps getting longer. It's like the creator's death plus like 96 years now or something. It's because of Disney. It's because
and it can be altered too. They can make an adjustment so that they say now there's time added to it.
Yeah, they keep adding time to it, and they've also changed trademark law so that things like Mickey Mouse no longer fall under the copyright area but fall under trademark, and you can own a trademark forever. Like there's no expiration on a trademark. McDonald's owns those golden arch signs as long as McDonald's exists. So now Mickey Mouse is a trademark. And Mickey Mouse, even though if you call your character Mickey Mouse, that's trademark infringement, and that's going to exist till the end of time. What copyright protects is like the specific work, but it keeps getting longer and the laws keep getting more complicated, basically because of Disney. And you notice every time that Mickey Mouse is about to fall into public domain where people can make their own Mickey Mouse cartoons, something changes so that they can't. Disney throws a lot of money at Congress. They donate to a lot of campaigns. A bill mysteriously appears, or it's part of some other bill that extends copyright a little bit longer for American creators who renewed their copyright after 1970 or whatever it is. Super specific thing, so that you can't ever get something into the public domain that was made after about 1920.
Let's continue throwing Disney under the bus because that'll get us some views. So if you look at their classics library, their animated classics, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, all the well, these are newer examples, but I mean, I think of them as newer examples. Kids watching this right now, they, before their time, plus 10 years, right? Well, those were not their stories. Like, these stories had existed, and then Disney just steps in and goes, oh, those were public domain. Beauty and the Beast, yeah, anybody can tell that story, yeah, but we'll do it our way. Mm-hmm. And now it's people really think that theirs is the gospel of Beauty and the Beast or what have you, right?
Yeah.
Or there was no Little Mermaid until Disney's Little Mermaid. There was no Aladdin until Disney did it. And now it falls on them to go, oh, well, we can't come up with original ideas, but we have these IPs everybody likes. So we're just going to redo those, and we'll call it live action, even though it's 90% CGI. Mm-hmm. Just done in a more realism look. Yeah.
Yeah, and the live action Beauty and the Beast, it had a couple new songs.
I haven't seen it because I have enough sense not to.
I've seen it.
I feel like they're just going to sing a lot of the same songs.
Oh, it's all the same songs. Plus, there's like 2 new ones which aren't even that good. There's some SJW stuff in it. I need to do some content on it because there's a lot of garbage in it. There's a part where like a guy comes out and berates a woman for knowing how to read. Which,
how dare she?
Which, well, it that wasn't really a thing. It's like who taught the children in the 18th century? It's like the woman taught the children. She knew how to read. Being able to play piano was considered a really important part of like a middle class or upper class girl's education because she had to entertain the family. So like women were expert piano players in the 18th century. They were great at music and all kinds of things. But you have these little moments of SJW-ness. There's a black maid in 18th century France. They just like throw that in there, and not that everything has to be historically accurate, but when it's 100 little points, there's clearly like an intent behind it. So they do this kind of stuff, and people go out and see it. They're like, I really liked the cartoon. I guess I'll go see the live action version. It's like, why? It's the same story told in the same sequence. You could just keep
watching the cartoon. Just show your kids the cartoon, and you should be good as far as Beauty and the Beast is concerned. Or hell, heaven forbid you go watch the black and white French film, which at one point it may still be was one of the top 250 films on IMDb.
Yeah.
But no one knows about that because we have to act like Disney is the only one who can make fairy tales.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that. And then I see the same thing with Force Awakens. People are like, well, they had to remake Episode 1 basically for a whole new generation. I'm like, that whole new generation doesn't have access to DVDs or something? Like,
I hate that defense of the film where it's like, oh, obviously what they were going to do. And people will say this a year after, by the way. Obviously, it was a safe play for them just to remake the first film and most of the original trilogy. That way they establish that it's a Star Wars and now they can make their own thing. No, you can actually just continue with the Star Wars feel and expand on the story without trying to rip off what was already in the franchise.
Yeah, like I don't know. I live in a future where anyone who has access to a movie theater can probably watch Star Wars without any effort. Like, you can't go back and watch the original one. Like, why do you have to redo it? Anyway, yeah, and you've seen that was just a stepping stone for them to kill off all the old characters, so you wouldn't have to.
Which I predicted.
Which so you
I
could just
knew that
focus
they
on these
had.
new characters that they think are better.
You have to kill off the old guard to force the liking of the new characters. If the new characters are fighting side by side with Han Solo and Luke Skywalker, then you can always just be like, oh, well, they're the sidekick to Luke Skywalker and Han Solo. Now, if you get rid of Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, now you're forced, if you are going to call yourself a Star Wars fan, you're forced into being a Rey fan.
Yeah.
They're forcing these fans. And, like in video games, Nintendo had a game called Donkey Kong. It's called Donkey Kong. The character you're playing is Jumpman, later called Mario. Mario rose up to be the face of Nintendo, to become the mascot. With Sega, they basically anointed, after some failed attempts at mascots, there was like an anthropomorphic spaceship in some shooter in like 1985. No one even knows the name of it. There was this Alex Kidd, some kind of monkey-looking child. Then they just said, oh, Sonic the Hedgehog looks cool. He's the new mascot. He didn't really earn it. And he didn't have to kill off Alex Kidd or an unforgettable robot to become the mascot. But Mario actually had to earn it through quality gameplay. With Rey, she shows up. She's some no-name actress whose only role before this was playing a dead body on a slab, as though that requires talent. And then they said, oh, look, you have this British accent for no reason. Keep it in the movie. We'll never explain that. And you're the new hero. You have all these abilities because women are strong. What the Force is female. It's what Kathleen Kennedy puts on her shirt. And there's no explanation behind it because chick Force can do anything. We want to sell merchandise. We have all the boys in the country already like Star Wars. We just need to make the girls like it now. That's where the new money is. So that's all they care about, is just getting a new base to exploit. Let's bring in a black guy because our numbers, the bean counter said the black kids, they're not being represented. They're not interested in Star Wars. We need to get them on board. The white kids will keep liking it,
Yeah. I see that as well, and it's like you could have had a female main character and you could have had a black main character. There's nothing specifically wrong with that. But when you start from a position of let's do it to appease a particular demographic or to try to capture a particular demographic, already you're throwing out the window a lot of your ability to write a good character. If you approach a feminist, or I should say a third wave, or like this new intersectional feminism, feminism as a word is actually a really complex word to talk about anyway, but if you approach it from that perspective, it's like you can't show her like having the male gaze upon her. You can't show her failing or being struck by a male.
Rey definitely.
All of a sudden, what can you write?
She's covered
How can
up
you write a hero?
a lot. You look at like an 80s film, a heroic barbarian warrior woman would hardly have any armor. but Rey has these robes on right tight. She's not Lara Croft circa 1996. I guess as far as her wardrobe goes, I feel like they did her some justice there to avoid the male gaze complex. But to just say because she's the new hero woman, she has all these abilities with no training, in ways that don't even make sense in the world of Star Wars, like the lightsaber called to her. Since when is that a thing?
Yeah, it's an inanimate object. Like never in any other movie is there any care about it. Anakin had several different lightsabers that got destroyed or lost in the prequel trilogy before he had that one lightsaber that he fought Obi-Wan with, and Obi-Wan wrecked him.
I don't think they can get a good director to work on any of these movies, because somebody who actually has artistic vision and value will want to tell their own story. Like George Lucas didn't set out there to tell somebody else's story. He didn't say, hey, instead of making Star Wars, let's remake something else that people kind of like.
Yeah, something I will say about George Lucas is he always set out to do something new. And it was from the 70s all the way through the prequel trilogy. He was always trying to deliver something new, whether it was like we're going to do Willow, we're going to do Dark Crystal, we're going to do lots of weird things. He was always trying to deliver a new and original and interesting experience for the viewers. Not all of them panned out 100%, but something I could say about pretty much every George Lucas movie is that it does something cool for its own sake. As much as it might be influenced by previous stuff, the way that Star Wars is influenced by Flash Gordon, Star Wars is something that was very different from the other things that were coming out in the late 1970s.
Yeah, I think they're just looking at what's most marketable right now. And I mean, as we say this, the most marketable thing going right now is Marvel's MCU. So DC, Warner Brothers, they have to try to copy that. They have to make their universe. And those Batman films always worked best when it was a self-contained movie where you didn't have to do a bunch of research. The first movie I saw in theaters was Batman 1989, and I still remember that experience. And everybody went to the movie theater knowing damn well who Batman was. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to see an origin story. Now they'll give you these characters. We know the history of. We know the character of Han Solo, but we have to have an origin story for some reason, even though we don't. But that's what we've got coming out now. Han Solo origin. How many times do we have to see the origin of Spider-Man to the point that I don't have any interest in these superheroes at all. It's always going to follow some kind of template. There's an origin. The villain played some role in the origin. The hero's got to beat that villain now. Though in many cases with the MCU, they don't die. It's like, we'll just capture Loki so he can bother us in the next movie.
Yeah, the MCU is an interesting thing to look at because as much as Disney is doing Star Wars wrong, I think they've been very successful with the MCU. And in a lot of cases, it delivered a lot of what consumers want and what comic book fans, I think, wanted as well. I think they've kind of grown the market. A lot of people don't remember that back in 2001, Marvel as a company was in bankruptcy. And they bought it because they saw a potential to just develop a lot of IP for that, transfer it to.
It was really
to
just that they wanted the characters. It wasn't something about selling comic books. They just wanted rights to something like 300 characters plus.
And Marvel's having massive problems right now because if you followed Comicsgate, because they've rewritten all of their old characters to be like gay, or they've replaced them with women.
But I think they've recently undone that.
Yeah, they're starting to undo
They found that those issues were not selling. So now it's like we're reverting back to Tony Stark is now Iron Man again.
Yeah.
Because it turned out that there was a specific person that was interested in comics, and they totally alienated that base, trying to look for a new base that didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, what it was is it's whether you're going to pay attention to sales, which is going to be your true fans, or you're going to pay attention to Twitter. So you had all these feminists on Twitter that would go buy the first issue of Squirrel Girl or something else like that.
Or they would say they would.
Yeah, well, they'd go buy the first issue maybe, and they'd be like, here it is. I'm so glad that there's this diversity higher in comics. And it'd be, maybe it'd be a Spider-Man comic, and you'd open it up, and Spider-Man would be being lectured to by like a fat Asian about how he's an oppressive white man. Like, that's actually been done.
Of course.
And so all the feminists would go out and maybe buy the first issue and show it on Twitter. And it's not, of course, if you know anything about comic books, it's not a one-issue thing. It's usually a 6-issue series, 6 or 12, depending on how long a story they're telling. So the issue sales would be here, and then volume 2, they'd have a bunch of copies they couldn't sell and had to destroy. And by the time you get to the 6th one, it's on the verge of cancellation. And the last year, they've had to cancel a bunch before they even finished their 6 issues. You couldn't get through 6 issues of a story without it being so unprofitable that you had to cancel the series. That's where they went with it. So you listen to the people on Twitter who are like, we need more representation in comics. You give that to them. They don't buy the comics. They just want to see those things being done in comics. They're not actually the money base. Taking it back to Star Wars, you see the same things with toys and other kinds of Star Wars memorabilia. The classic fans, which are turned off by the newer stuff, they don't go out and buy the toys. The value of Star Wars as a franchise exists in not just the movies, not just movie sales. Ticket sales are good. Ticket sales have been good, and they'll probably be okay for a while still until like the train completely falls off the tracks. But the toy sales are not good, which means that you're not having that long tail of fans where they're like, I like the movie, then I buy all the merchandise and I become like a Star Wars collector or something like that. The value of George Lucas's original fans is that they spent a lot of money on Star Wars. They bought the EU books, they bought all the toys, they bought the games. they had big collections of stuff. That's a lot of money that's getting thrown around. And if those people are not really willing to spend the money, all of a sudden the value of the franchise starts to go down. Your movie was a way to convert people into mega fans. And if the movies aren't good and they're not affecting people, you're not going to have the mega fans to generate all the money.
I don't like the concept of fans as much as I think it's become more of a four-letter word than it used to be. Where
I've said you shouldn't be a fan of things.
I don't want fans. I want viewers. Maybe commenters, whatever, listeners. I'm okay with that, but I just don't think that I need people devoting their time to me like I'm the god here or any of that. When you're a fan, what can you say that's actually critical? Like if I said, okay, my favorite movie is Terminator 2 Judgment Day, does that make me a Terminator fan? Well, what if I dislike most of the films in the franchise?
Yeah, exactly.
So if at some point people could be calling themselves Star Wars fans and dislike most of the Star Wars movies. And that may even be now at this point. There could be 5 movies people don't like and only 3 that they like.
Yeah, I think even more, I think there's a lot of people who call themselves Star Wars fans and they only really like Empire Strikes Back. There's like one movie that they actually like and they've never bought anything else. You're a person who likes Empire Strikes Back. Fans, I've told people not to be a fan. In other words, like you need to be careful with your money and not just throw it at something because it's pleased you in the past. You need to evaluate each product they put out. But that's why we have so many franchises, is that you have something successful in the past and that people are interested in that because it continues to be talked about. So you just make more of those movies until it becomes totally unprofitable and you kill it. Then you wait a few more years and you bring it back, like Star Trek. So
with Spider-Man, they have proven that they don't have to wait long. Like the window for the reboot, it was like we had Batman and Robin kills Batman in 97. Then we have a new Batman Begins 2005. That's a lot of time to try to get it right, as one would think. And now it's, we can wait 2 or 3 years. And
yeah, when did Spider-Man 3
there's
come
people. Spider-Man 3 was 2007.
Yeah, and then they made 2 more Spider-Man movies.
2012.
And then they came
out with
this.
And then they made another maybe it's
14.
Year. And then 2016. Like there wasn't, that 2014 to 2016, that's a reboot in a 2-year window.
That's really fast.
So, at least wait. There used to be some kind of justification. Oh, well, now we have CGI. Or when the new audience was born, that when they weren't alive to see the old one in theaters. 2 years is not that justification. It's just, how do we shoehorn this into the other things we're doing?
Yeah,
here's a new way to make some money.
What's that? Well, we know that people like Spider-Man, so we'll continue to make Spider-Man. And I use Star Trek as an example. Like Star Trek eventually became unprofitable with what they were doing with it. So they pulled the plug, and there was no Star Trek on TV for a while. This was after Enterprise. And then they rebooted it with the J.J. Abrams over-the-top space opera version of Star Trek in 2009. And I think the time spent between those was about 5 or 6 years. So in that amount of time, you had a lot of Star Trek fans who were able to kind of clamor for something new. You knew that if you delivered something new, there'd be a lot of excitement for it. Somehow, though, Spider-Man, they just decided that wasn't in any way necessary.
I actually made a prediction. There's a video of me on one of my past channels. I think it's on the Legendary Bass channel. This was in 2010. I correctly predicted the course of Spider-Man, wherein they would have concurrent actors playing Spider-Man. So Sony's going to have like a CGI Spider-Man animated with like Donald Glover as the voice of Spider-Man. Meanwhile, they have this British kid pretending to be American in the MCU films. So they're going to have 2 actors at the same time playing Spider-Man. And I thought about this because they do this in comic books. There's several books for Batman, Spider-Man, Superman that come out each month, and you get the one that you want or both or whatever. But that way you can have 2 different storylines for the same character at the same time. And I think that could happen with more characters even. We have Lego Batman. Lego Batman could have another movie, but then there's going to be another guy playing Batman somewhere else, right?
Yeah, a bunch of different Batmans. Because there was like Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, New Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2099. There's a lot of different versions of Spider-Man out there too.
Well, it's cheaper to do it in the comic books, but they're trying to bring that justification of, well, they do it in the comic books, so we can do it in the movies. We can have a new Spider-Man every year if there's different actors playing them, and you can just go to the more serious one or the fun cartoonish one. Whichever one. If that's your complaint about this one, go see the other ones. We have a Spider-Man for everybody.
Yeah, I should mention Ben-Hur, the classic Ben-Hur, was actually a remake, but of a silent and black and white.
Oh,
Ben-Hur.
well, see, when you said the classic, I thought you were talking about the silent film.
Yeah, so what people think of as the classic one from the 1960s, 50s or 60s. There's a big change in technology. There's not a big change in technology from Spider-Man, whenever it came out, 2000. The original
2002 is still a lot of CGI Spider-Man. It's not like they didn't have access to CGI with the 2012 one, so now that justifies it. And as practical effects versus CGI, I used to feel like I was the guy who was the champion of the practical, but now I'm coming to the point where I'm realizing that there's more that can be done with the computer. If you actually look back at some of the 80s films, you can see facial animations are not nearly as good as your memory thought they were in creatures. If you watch the original Jurassic Park, the hatching of I think it was a velociraptor, they see the egg hatch, so stiff. There's only so many servos you can jam into a tiny little robot dino, And if you look at the faces in the Jurassic World of like the raptors, when they're like muzzled and they're like locked in and they have all these animations to them, you can do so much more with the computer. But if you show some restraint, you can actually get it to look right.
Yeah, and I've talked about this in a couple of different capacities. CGI Yoda is superior to the puppet in that you can actually do facial expressions and have him move about in a scene rather than be a stiff little puppet. And the puppet was great in Empire Strikes Back, don't get me wrong. It was great for what it was, and Frank Oz did a great job with it. But like it looked like a puppet,
I would say that puppet Yoda is superior to CGI Yoda for the fact that he's introduced as a puppet, so I feel like we know what he looks like.
He should have remained
And then when
a
the
puppet.
CGI one comes about, now we know that that's a false Yoda.
That's an interesting point.
It's like I always go to helicopters with this. When you see a new movie, there's never a helicopter in it. They'll have to use a helicopter. It'll always be CGI. But helicopters exist and people have seen helicopters, so we know what helicopters actually look like. And that up there is not a real helicopter. Now, if dragons don't exist in our world, so a CGI dragon appears, and throughout that whole film the dragon is always CGI, you can't tell me that's not what a dragon looks like, because I've never actually seen a dragon to compare it. So I've seen Yoda, and he's a puppet, and now he's not, so he doesn't look as good to me. I also feel like Yoda shouldn't have to use the Force to lightsaber duel and flip. Like, he should be beyond that. Like, his little stature, he has to use the Force differently.
There's an interesting moment in Revenge of the Sith that kind of brings that home, where essentially he loses his weapon, and at that point Darth Sidious is staring at him with the Force and with a lightsaber, and Yoda knows he's beaten. And like, it's symbolically like when he loses his weapon, he knows that he can't be a warrior anymore. It's an interesting thing, but I'll talk about that probably in the future when I do that video. CGI, I think that as our technology to view movies improves, this is something I've noticed, our ability to comprehend the limitations of past technology advances. If you watched on VHS the original Star Wars movies, as I did growing up, it's blurry 480p or 480i. You watch it in like high def 1080p, you can see how plastic the sets are. You can see how fake everything is. The unreality of what's there becomes kind of gets into sharper focus as you up the fidelity of the medium that you're viewing it in. But with CGI, the opposite can happen in a lot of cases, whereas you up the fidelity, it actually looks a little bit better than it did as a blurry DVD or as a blurry VHS. And so it's a weird mix between those two. I don't think...
Well, with CGI, they can easily update all of the textures.
Yeah.
They can plug in a new algorithm for how water behaves, and now they've got better water. if I look at a movie like Terminator 2 and they've changed something last year when they re-released it in AMC theaters in 3D, I think they like took Arnold's face and put him on the stunt double, things like that. Well, when you watch a movie once in theaters, you saw that stunt double for a couple seconds, and you didn't have enough time or the ability to discern it wasn't Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now you have still frames, you have all these different, you know, the just that still shot is all over the internet. So now there's this scrutiny that didn't exist when the movies were new. In Star Wars, if an effect wasn't the most amazing or something didn't break right or explode correctly, it wasn't harped on the way a new film's effects can be, where people are seeing the same effect over and over or have it saved on their phone.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's also a good point, is that we have a lot more technology to hyper evaluate every single little bit. And that's another part of the nostalgia, I think, for the practical effects of yesteryear, is that you just weren't looking at them that close. You didn't see them as many times as you see them now. You had less ability to scrutinize them. They're good for what they are, and I really appreciate all the things that were done in the past that aren't CGI. And that doesn't mean that CGI is a bad tool. CGI is a good tool. It's one tool among many. Because
it doesn't need to be the only tool, though, which I find to be too often the case. Like I was saying, with the helicopters are always CGI now, even though we have real helicopters. If I see a bad explosion in a movie, I'm definitely calling it out. Praise be to Michael Bay for being the only guy who uses real explosions anymore. I see all these Marvel film explosions that are just so obviously CGI because, oh, well, we didn't want anybody hurt, and we didn't really want to have to actually go outside and leave our air-conditioned studio to shoot this. So let's just put up the green screen and, oh, look, there's an explosion in a waterfall. Oh, you guys are so impressed. And no, I'm not.
Good point. All right, so we've been talking for quite a while, an hour and 20 minutes. Let's wrap it up a little bit. When do you see this train falling off the rails?
As Star Wars or MCU or whichever?
Where do you see this continuing, let me phrase it this way, this cycle of repeating movie franchises? Where do you see this falling off the rails? Do you see this ever becoming unprofitable, like repeating the same formula over and over and again, these superhero movies,
could happen,
same superheroes?
It could happen pretty soon. It could happen sooner than people expect, because I'm finding that if I have viewers and if you get more viewers than me because you talked about Star Wars also and things like this, there's a lot of people who are sick of it already. I saw a poll yesterday on MSN, a website people don't visit as much as they used to, a portal, and it said Avengers Infinity War is now in theaters. Do you plan to see it? There was 250,000 votes. 70% said no. I think people are a little tired of having to keep up with 16 movies and trying to remember this guy in the background and his name for when he makes a cameo in the next thing. People are getting a little tired of that. I think people would rather see the old Batman, where it's like all you need to remember is maybe a couple things from the last movie, if that. In Batman Returns, there wasn't a lot to recall from Batman to keep the Batman story in line, right?
Yeah, it was pretty much a self-contained.
Yeah, I would rather see a self-contained film, put the whole story there. Don't make me do a lot of research and homework after the fact to try to make sense of your movie that has plot holes. I think people are really getting close to where they're like, okay, that's enough with this.
I felt like we were close with Justice League, right? Because Justice League ended up kind of flopping.
That flopped, so now we're waiting for MCU to flop. And once both have flopped, they're going to have to look for something else. Though what they may do is just wait 10 years and then give us more of the same thing.
Yeah.
Restart the Avengers in 10 years. Now there's a young Tony Stark. Pretend all this other stuff didn't happen. Comic book fans and whatever will be perfectly okay with it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Possibly.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't know what the next thing's going to be, but I want to look back in the 50s to the 60s and 70s, going into the 80s in the movie industry as a whole. I think there's some repeating cycles here, because back in the 50s and 60s, the 60s were thought of as a pretty bad time for movies. Movies were all about spectacle, like big, kind of like what movies are about today, is big time spectacle, and audiences got tired of that. They felt like they had to have spectacle because people wouldn't stop watching TV to go see a movie that wasn't about spectacle. They had the entertainment in their home called TV. TV was still pretty new at the time. Now we have much more advanced versions of TV where not only can I choose not to go to the movies to watch a movie, that movie is competing for my time with literally every movie that's ever been made.
And there's so many, they're calling this the golden age of TV. No one has time to watch all of these amazing TV shows, which are actually in many cases web series because they're actually on a streaming platform.
Yeah, they're on Netflix or something like that.
What if the kids with their amazingly short attention spans can't stand 2.5 hours in a movie theater? And the movie theater is a relic. It is a dinosaur. There is no practical purpose for a movie theater when your phone can show you the movie just as good.
Yeah.
At possibly as good of a resolution, and certainly more than it used to be.
Yeah,
so why should we have to go somewhere to watch this stuff? It's possible people would just rather watch something on YouTube than actually go pay money to see something.
Yeah, and I can tell you from my perspective, the way my monitor is and the the sound monitors I have, it's as big as it would appear to be in a movie theater. People are like, oh, the screen's so big. That's all relative. The further away you sit, the smaller the screen is, So people have big TVs. They're cheap and easy to get, at least if you're in the first world. And
you can get $300 4K at Walmart.
Yeah, and you can sit kind of close to the TV, put it on your desk, watch the movie in super high resolution. You can buy a $100 surround sound system that will sound as good as a movie theater if you set it up right in a good room, because the speakers are close to you. They don't need to be super loud. Yeah, you're missing.
Well, the only thing keeping these theaters going is that people, if you could watch Avengers today on your phone, people would rather do that than go to the movie theater.
Yeah, and I think
so. They're looking at it as another way to charge money for it. So, okay, you saw it in theaters. Now buy it digital. Now before the Blu-ray, all this, right? They're just doing that because there's more revenue streams there. If all of it was available day one, at home, mobile, whatever, there wouldn't be any reason for the theater. But they don't need the theaters to go out of business because they will come up with these movies and say, oh, you have to see it in theaters. People, I remember there was this Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, The Last Stand. People are like, oh, yeah, I want to see that, but not for $10 or whatever, because that's the same price of an Avengers film. And so it's like, I would see that movie, but I wouldn't see that movie in theaters. So it's gotten to the point where the only people going to the theater are seeing the movies that are meant for the big screen, and then everything else you may as well just stream on Netflix. So if you have a film that's not a major tentpole, it's not making any money whatsoever. And there used to be a time where these studios would put out a lot of movies that cost $3 to $20 million, give them a good marketing campaign, and they can make $100 or $300 million bucks. Like Crocodile Dundee, that cheap movie makes $300 million.
Or Sixth Sense, which was like a total Black Swan.
That thing that totally doesn't happen anymore. You have a much better chance of winning the lottery. Somebody wins the lottery every day. These little movies don't get nationwide releases anymore. And they get video on demand.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of independent filmmakers that think that they're gonna like make the next Clerks or something. And
always. For 10 years, I was a film festival programmer, and I cannot tell you enough how many people think they are making Clerks in a coffee shop. There's 100 people making Clerks in the coffee shop right now thinking they're going to make all the money. Well, Kevin Smith is not a talented filmmaker. He just happened to be the only one making films in 1994 in the way he did, and now that market's saturated. There's no money in independent film because you can't get in the theater. You don't have any kind of way to get
how do you monetize it?
And there's no advertising to get anybody in the seats. There's absolutely no money in movies.
Well, I wouldn't say there's no. I think the market's going to shift. Now, I do want to say that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg both correctly predicted this exact thing we're talking about. It's like there's only going to be a few movies that come out every year, and they're going to be super, super expensive movies. And everyone's like, "Oh, George and Steven, you old fogies, you can't predict the future. That's stupid." It
looks a lot like 2018.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. And I think those guys knew a little bit more about the business than we did back then, because they were right. And that's what we get. You get these huge, big budget movies, and when you sink $500 million of budget plus advertising budget, right? Like there's a production budget, and then you got to spend millions of dollars advertising the thing. You sink $500 million into something, you need that return. That's a big investment. So one of the reasons that I think movies are so mediocre now is that you have to hit all the buttons to get all the fans in the seats, because you have to make your money back at least. You can't gamble $500. You have to.
Well, they
You
also
have to
want
be
to make
pretty
all
sure.
of it early because word of mouth is spread by good films. You can't make a good film like the way Jimmy Fallon was making a viral video. This will definitely go viral. It's not, oh, we did all this right, so now it has to be good. There's not really a formula for quality. So if there was, every movie would be good
I think
if it
there's a.
was that
I think
easy.
there's a formula for like minimum competency.
Well, I think all these movies are mediocre. They're perfectly mediocre. They can't be the worst movie ever made. There's too much talent put into it for it to really be that incompetent.
Yeah.
But they end up with a formula that gives them a perfectly mediocre but serviceable movie that makes a lot of money because it hits all these certain notes. We have the SJWs are satisfied by this over here, so that gets us some hype in the news. And then we're making this call over this way, and the fans are happy enough, and they all go see it week one, and then they forget about it.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I would mention too with like Last Jedi is that it had the biggest drop off from week 1 to week 2, and people are like, why is that? And it's like, people heard it sucked. That's it. Because
Yeah,
when you buy a movie
but
ticket, the gross does not convert into quality movies, because you buy the movie ticket before you watch the movie.
and all movies cost the same too. So if the movie costs, well, pretty much, I mean, if you're watching the standard matinee or whatever, say you have a $10 ticket for The Shape of Water or $10 ticket for the Star Wars, regardless of the film's price, the tickets are the same. Maybe if the tickets were different, a rom-com was cheaper, maybe some people would still go to those.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. I do think that there are at least some companies that are trying to offer some alternatives. There's Amazon Direct Video, which is video distribution service that's really meant for people to make films. This stuff that's been kind of disappeared from YouTube, all that kind of content, I think, is set up to be monetizable on Amazon Direct Video, but I don't know what Amazon's doing with the platform. It's like they created it and didn't they just ended it there. Like you could find these movies on Amazon, but
I think it
it's not
sucks that
clearly
you can't
integrated
make
into the
money with a
service.
good movie. You could go out and you could make a better movie now than you could 20 years ago because you have all the tech, all
And
the leg
cheaper.
up, all you have, your computer comes with all the software you need, all this stuff. You have talent in your area, but no one will watch it, and it doesn't matter how good it is, you're making no money because it doesn't have some brand going for it. So people are going around making their own fan films, which I find unscrupulous. You go and you make like a Star Wars fan film. Star Trek, it had people. CBS Paramount was coming down on people for making fan films. Tell your own story. But if you do that without that Star Wars up in the title, Star Trek, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, whatever guys were doing lately, no one has any interest on it. And like you look at it in social media, if you do amazing art, if you can paint your neighbor, no one cares. You can paint Deadpool, awesome. I like this. I got to show everybody.
That's an interesting point with marketing. So I don't know when this will fall off the rails. And what do you think will end up being the replacement? Do you think that movies as an art form has a future in some way that we are not aware of?
Years ago, I was approached to write a book on the 50 best movies ever made, and I never really got around to it. Instead, I gotten so much acrimony in me from just the concept of where movies are today. And I feel like the best movies that will ever be made have already been made. We've perfected that art line, and we're going to have to look for something else. We're probably going to need a virtual reality narrative of some kind. At one point, I thought that video games were going to replace the motion picture as the way to tell a story. And now we look at the mess they've made, and it's like, who's in the battle, neck and neck between Hollywood and video games? Who's going to circle the drain first? But, I kind of think that people could really get into ebooks because we've gotten to the point now where we can circumvent publishers and just get our story without anybody else screwing it up out there for the public. So anything that has less people meddling with it, you and I make YouTube channels. No one's telling us what we can't have in there. Well, to some extent, right? I mean, if we want monetization, whatever. But if we put out our own stories, I think people will eventually start to actually, hopefully, go towards quality instead of, oh, hey, that has a character I like,
Well,
because it's I grew up with them,
the ebooks market is blown up and is actually slaughtering the old school publishers, because I'm in the book market, so I have to know about these sorts of things. Ebooks are really valuable, and what people are looking for in ebooks, it shifts all the time. There's a bunch of different ways that you can make money in it and that you can find an audience, and there are no more gatekeepers, so it could be exactly the story that you want to tell. I don't know if there's a version of that for movies that people will end up incentivizing, and I think there's generally resistance, I find, with creators to selling things cheaply. I'll just say this. So the number of people who are aspiring authors I meet, they haven't sold any books yet, and they're like, why are you selling your books for 99 cents? I'm like, because I want to sell them. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, but you deserve $10 for your book. It's like,
Well,
no
see,
one will buy it.
I'm doing
Who
stand-up
cares?
comedy, and I'm getting my first hour in a theater, and I'm thinking that when someone shows up to see Kevin Hart, it's not because he's great at stand-up comedy. It's because this is your chance to see the movie star. So this is like your little A Night with Kevin Smith type thing. It's not, yeah, okay, he's supposed to be doing stand-up, but he's not funny. So the money in stand-up comedy is making bad movies and then having people come see you in person. So they're coming to see that figure. Now, people who go and see me when I do this hour I'm doing in June, they don't have any idea who I am. So I have to actually be funny. It would be nice if there was some kind of actual way to make money doing what worked good for everybody without everybody else needing to get their piece in it. Like, oh, you have to have a TV show first before you can really go on tour. There was this model who said she was one of the models in what the Mad Max movie that came up. She was the pregnant one.
Oh,
She said something like, it used to be you had to work to get famous. Now you have to be famous to get work.
yeah, that's an interesting little truism. So yeah, I don't know what is going to be the ebooks for movies, but I think at some point there probably will be, because I think people are interested in seeing seeing stories and that sort of stuff. Obviously, Netflix is very popular, and people like to watch movies on Netflix. I think
I think Netflix is in serious trouble. I think that eventually Disney is going to assume leadership of Hulu, rebranded as Disney Streaming, and we're going to have Amazon Prime versus Hulu/Disney. Netflix is such a small potato compared to Amazon. They're going to fold soon. They're going to be the MySpace of streaming.
I have not heard. Oh, I've heard people predict their doom several times over the years, but it hasn't really come about.
Well, if you look at their original content, how bad it is. They put out a movie in January called The Open House, horrendous. Then they put out another one called Dude. And in many cases, these are not films that they made. They're films that were shelved and they acquired on the cheap, put a Netflix original across the front. And so that way they're putting out all this content. Now, it's easy for them to judge what content they want streaming when it's a film in the 80s and 90s that people like, and it has a good score. Hey, The Shawshank Redemption, let's get that. Who would have complained? But when it's brand new and they don't have that kind of history to look back on, they're finding that they're not very good judges of talent, really, when it comes to this. So most of their original stuff is garbage because they really don't know what they're doing.
I don't really watch Netflix, I'll be honest. I don't watch much
There you
TV
go,
at all.
because it's bad.
Well, it's not worth my time. And people are like, have you seen this series or that series? I'm like, I don't have time to spend 30 hours watching TV. I just don't have the time. Anytime I do spend with it, every Netflix series I've watched has ended up being like a nihilistic depression fest of things that I don't like.
They got a new sci-fi one that's just every sci-fi story wrapped up. So it's like, oh yeah, but it's not enough that there's clones and robots and androids. There's also holograms, and I'm like, well, then if there's hologram hotel, then why would they have this hotel if no one has been there for 50 years? They haven't had any guests. It's real estate. Like, you're not supposed to think about that. Just get in the story. I'm like, oh, give me a break, But yeah, if you want to wrap it up, that's about all I've got to say. I guess I can. I don't know. I have to look for more things to complain about. I just find myself complaining about everything. I'm trying to do my videos maybe 5 to 6 times a week. The channel's Vaughn Jog Vlog. If you can't find that, just type in Run Rant. Should be the first thing that comes up. I like doing these little guest things with other YouTubers. I find that a lot of people have come to me because I I trashed Star Wars before it was cool to do that. Maybe if you're on the bleeding edge of that, then people think that maybe you have the right ideas and whatever. So I've talked to a few people
come
about
by and
these
be like,
things.
he's just, Stu's just riding the wave of popularity. I'm like, I hated Star Wars back when you got death threats for hating Star Wars. I'm not riding any wave of popularity.
I'll tell you what really undid me was giving a bad review to Inglourious Bastards. How dare you besmirch Quentin Tarantino on the internet?
Yeah.
Jesus.
I think that's actually my least favorite Quentin Tarantino movie, by the way. Maybe I'll do a review of it or something, or an analysis.
Okay, well, it was good talking with you, David.
Yeah, it was good talking to you. And
right.
Vaughn Jog Vlog, I will link it in my description, and you can check out his channel. It focuses a lot on movie reviews, and they're usually pretty short and easy to digest because he does it while running. That's his shtick. And
Not easy. Yeah, I say that I run literally YouTube's most original daily vlog.
So you can check him out there and enjoy some of that content, and we will catch you guys next time. Have a good one. You can find me at dvspress.com, davidvstewart.com. DVS Press is going to have all my books. You can find those on Amazon as well. They're all pretty cool as far as I'm concerned. So check them out. Some of them are free, and we'll see you next time.